The time is just gone 8:21, and we continue this morning with the major global news, and that is the 2020 U.S. presidential election. And we continue unpacking the election. And this morning, we're joined by Jeff Mackler, who is an American activist from San Francisco, California, also the National Secretary of the Socialist Action, a Trotskyist political party. He was a nominee of the Socialist Action for the U.S. Senate from California in 2006, President of the United States of America in 2016, and 2020 presidential candidate. Jeff, good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be with you. You
Yes,
should
I
know
know.
that I ran for president in 2020 against Donald Trump and Joseph Biden.
Well,
The
Jeff,
results are still coming in, but I don't think that the United States is yet ready to elect a socialist for president. But I'm glad to be with you talking about U.S. politics.
well, I recall the last time we spoke, and you actually told me that you said the day you become the president of the United States of America, you will be inviting me to the White House.
You have it, and the invitation still holds.
Right. Let's talk about the election. And I see Trump obviously like a little kid throwing his toys out of the cot. And we see him erupting, making all sorts of baseless statements, talking about illegal votes, election being stolen from him, and the like. What is happening, Jeff?
Well, this time around, I think it's more bluster and bluff. There's no one serious in politics who has heard Trump say anything that, even if it's true, could reverse the election totals. He's about to be the loser in the American election. They're counting the final votes, and Biden is way ahead in Nevada and Arizona. If that hold leads, and everybody thinks it will, then Vice President Biden will be the president of the United States. And Trump may also lose in Pennsylvania and Georgia. So his complaints are basically frivolous. You know, a couple of people were, where he says, denied observer status in Georgia. Someone claimed that 52 votes that came in late were put on a stack that was counted. But the order of magnitude of the complaints that Trump had doesn't, in anyone's opinion that I know of anywhere in the country, merit the courts reversing it. What was dangerous and what everybody in the country worried about was a month ago when asked whether or not President Trump would accept a peaceful transition should he lose the election. He said no. He's against the mail-in ballots, and he basically declared before the American people that he was going to determine the winner on election day, and therefore not count the expected 60 to 90 million mail-in ballots. And he said if people go out into the street and protest, he assumes that they would be violent, and he would call in federal troops to quash any protests. Well, that caused major organizations in the United States to say that if the president literally disenfranchises tens of millions of people and calls in federal troops to beat people up, if not shoot them down, that caused a whole series of things that have never happened in this country. Major central labor councils, even the AFL-CIO, implied that they would close the country down in a general strike. Meanwhile, when election day came last Tuesday, President Trump was much more mild. He said he personally thought he won the election. He might have to go to the Supreme Court, and he let it go at that. And a minute later, his vice presidential candidate, Mike Pence, went to the microphone to say that we had to count the votes, which is what Trump implied that he would not do. Well, it's 3 days later. It's now Thursday going on Friday morning. The final votes are still coming in, although in some places they may be delayed. It looks clearer than ever to everyone that Trump will lose the election, and there will be a moment of tension as to whether or not he accepts that. But the worst variant is that he will go to the courts. Hopefully, he believes his 6-3 majority on the U.S. Supreme Court will turn over the nation to him. Nobody really believes that because he hasn't demonstrated in a single case anywhere that the votes cast were illegitimate.
Jeff, just looking at the reaction from all over the world, and particularly from us here on the African continent, and we've seen many Africans express the sentiment calling it a disgrace and a mess, considering that Africa's always been on the receiving end when it comes to elections, when it comes to questions being raised, whether elections in Africa have been free and fair, and looking at the behavior of Donald Trump, this is a very strong sentiment where African leaders and people in Africa are actually saying that Trump is setting a bad example for Africa and also for the rest of the world.
Absolutely. I will say this. I told you at the beginning that I ran against Donald Trump and Joseph Biden. I don't think there's a fundamental difference between them. You know, Joseph Biden has the support of 131 billionaires in the United States, and President Trump only 93. So on the big money, Biden is way ahead. If I were to ask you to guess, I'm sure you'd be wrong on how much money was spent on the elections in the United States. The figure is double any previous election for the presidency, $13.3 billion. In other words, elections in capitalist America are a contest between the great parties of capital, between the parties that own the wealth in this country. And neither of them poses any serious difference. For example, when President Trump asked for a $780 billion military budget, the Democrats in Congress asked for $50 billion more. The Democrats and the Republicans both voted a $1.3 billion in tax relief for the rich. The Democrats and Republicans both support U.S. military interventions everywhere in the world. We have American troops in 170 countries, 1,100 military bases, and there are 7 ongoing wars that began under the Obama administration that both the Democrats and Republicans are continuing with. We have an unprecedented, today, on this very day, 112,000 new COVID-19 infections, the largest number since the COVID pandemic began and the largest number in the world. The United States ranks number 1, with literally every state of all 50 having increases of massive proportions and deaths. We have over 9 million people infected in the United States alone and 230,000 dead. And by February, that number is expected to double. So neither the Democrats or the Republicans have fundamental differences on climate crisis, on military spending, on providing medical care for the people, on stopping the global warming, which is produced by the giant multinational U.S. oil companies that basically own and control the government along with the military industrial complex and aerospace. You know, we had between 15 and 26 million people in the streets over the past month or two defending Black Lives Matter and proclaiming loud and clear that we live in a society marked by systemic racism, the largest demonstrations in the history of the world. Imagine the spectacle where millions of white youth go into the streets to march side by side in the millions across the country, along with their Black sisters and brothers, to protest the racism that is inherent in the system. The prison industrial complex that has the United States number 1 in the world in the number and percentage of its people in prison who are forced to work at 50 cents an hour with Fortune 500 corporations that use prison labor, that is slave labor. So on the fundamentals, despite the fact that Trump is an open racist, bigot, moron, warmonger with a snarl on his face. The record of Vice President Biden is a closeted racist bigot with a smile on his face. He presided over the segregation laws in the United States in the old Jim Crow that maintained the power of the Southern slavocracy in the United States. He backed every military bill, every anti-climate bill. He is the consensus of the ruling class that the ugly image of President Trump has to be replaced by a smiling, passive image of Joe Biden. So yes, we live in a Truman Show, Potemkin village world where the United States has the appearance of democracy and voting, but even to play in the game of electoral politics, you have to be a multi-billionaire. You have to control all the media. You have to be able to control the state governments that allow access. You know, when I ran for U.S. Senate that you mentioned, I qualified in every way, and I asked that my name appear on the ballot, and they said okay, but they wouldn't put my party, Socialist Action, next to my name on the California ballot for the U.S. Senate. I sued, and I lost the suit, and they fined me in legal expenses $240,000 because I sued for the democratic right to list my party on the ballot. The Democrats need something like 50 signatures to get on the ballot in California. Anybody who is not a Democrat or Republican needs 500,000 signatures to qualify just to get on the ballot, and they count the signatures. So yes, the world is witnessing, as you're asking me, the spectacle of a president who is threatened to refuse to step down, who is threatened to annihilate the votes of tens of millions of people. But I don't think the ruling rich themselves want that. I think Trump will fade into oblivion. But what is frightening, what is dangerous, is the fact that even though Trump has lost by 4 million votes in the popular vote, the United States has an electoral college system where states vote are collected until you get 270 votes, which is undemocratic. But 69 million people have voted for Donald Trump, 73 million for Vice President Biden. That is a bit frightening, my friends. 69 million people who vote for open racist bigot is a frightening thing. It indicates that there's a deep polarization in American society. It indicates that even working people who have lost their jobs and are blaming it on immigrants taking their jobs or blacks taking their jobs, people who are forced into the gig economy, a huge number. The actual labor participation rate in the United States is 63%, means 37% of the population who are eligible to work don't have jobs. People are worried about being evicted from their homes. 1 out of 5 people live paycheck to paycheck. If they don't get paid, they get evicted. They can't survive. The homeless rate is incredible. The incarceration rate is massive and racist. The unemployment rate is at an all-time high in the modern era. So working people are angry and frustrated. Some are moving to the left and are joining the anti-racist protests, are angry, engaging in more strikes than ever before, and others are accepting the racism of President Trump and scapegoating the poor, scapegoating other countries, scapegoating United States allies, scapegoating other nations, invading other nations like Venezuela or Iran to steal their resources because they're oil rich. So we live in a terrible situation. I haven't seen anything like this in my lifetime, and I have 80 years under my belt. This is a nation in great crisis, and it's polarizing deeply between a growing left-wing consciousness among youth and social activists and older white uh, elements of the working class who believe that Trump is the solution and blame it all, scapegoat immigrants, poor people, blacks, Latinos, Native Americans, and other countries.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much for that and for coming on this morning and unpacking what is taking place in the United States of America, particularly the elections. And hopefully, you and I will get to chat a lot more in detail in weeks to come. I think there's just so much that you can actually bring to the discussion and to the airwaves of our media organization and our radio station. But for now, we wish you all the best. Please be safe. Take care, and thank you once again. We do appreciate your
And
time.
thank you. I'm honored to be with you, and I wish I could be there in person. Maybe we'll make that happen one day.
Well, we hope so. But for now, you take care and please be safe.
Thank you very much.
Jeff Mackler joining us this morning out of the United States of America.
They say breakfast is the most important meal of the